Welcome to Movies in the Making. In today's episode, we are going to be looking at the 1975 fantasy comedy film Monty Python and the Holy Grail, originally released by EMI Films and directed by Terry Gilliam and Terry Jones. Here, we will dive deep into the story of the production of this film. This film is honestly one of the funniest feature films to exist. Even making the film was a huge joke you would find funny, unless rough behind-the-scenes stories upset you. As it comes from Monty Python, that comedy group we all know so well, making their first narrative film obviously required a lot of efforts in the making, as did making it funny. If you would like to hear about how more films were done behind the scenes, please like down below and subscribe to this channel for more videos. Now, sit back and enjoy the show. You are all in for an amusing ride. Monty Python's idea to center their first full-length feature film about the Arthurian legend came from a practical need to involve all 6 members in a cohesive story. After their success on television, where they made the series Monty Python's Flying Circus, the group was divided about moving into film, but the shared love of cinema by some members pushed the idea forward. The legend of King Arthur and the Holy Grail offered a perfect structure. Each member could portray a different knight, and the myth was well known enough to parody freely, as its details were vague and open to creative interpretation. The team wanted to make the film that stood on its own rather than feeling like 3 extended TV sketches stitched together, and the Grail Quest provided the perfect vehicle for that ambition. However, the film's tiny budget of less than £300,000 forced the team to be wildly inventive. Unable to afford horses, for instance, they comedically mimicked the sound of hooves with coconut shells, which became one of the film's most iconic gags. When permission to film at several Scottish castles was revoked at the last minute, they shot Doune Castle from various angles to make it appear like multiple locations. These creative solutions not only kept the production alive, but helped shape the unique comedic identity of the Holy Grail, blending resourcefulness with absurdity. The lack of studio oversight, thanks to funding from rock bands like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, also gave the Pythons total creative freedom, an unusual and treasured luxury that allowed their surreal humor and experimental ideas to flourish unfiltered. Graham Chapman was chosen to play King Arthur in the film because the other Pythons considered him the best actor among them, known for his ability to convincingly portray serious authority figures while still embracing the group's signature absurdity. His straight-faced, uptight performance provided a perfect comedic contrast to the film's surrounding chaos, grounding the humor in something believable. Chapman's background was as unique as his talent, initially training as a doctor before turning to comedy at Cambridge, where he joined the Footlights and began collaborating with John Cleese. Though he battled personal struggles, particularly with alcoholism, which at times affected his performance, he overcame them and delivered some of his best work while sober, including his leading roles in The Holy Grail and later Monty Python's Life of Brian, Warner Bros. 1979. Despite his promising talents and creativity, Chapman's solo career never fully flourished before his untimely death in 1989, making his contributions to Monty Python all the more significant and cherished. Terry Gilliam, originally from Minneapolis and Los Angeles, brought his background in cartooning and magazine illustrations to Monty Python, using his distinctive cutout animation style, blending absurd drawings with elements from classical arts and photography to create the surreal visual transitions. After moving to London, he applied this unique technique to various British comedy shows before joining Monty Python, where his animation served as the visual glue between sketches and became a hallmark of Flying Circus. Gilliam continued to style in The Holy Grail, where he co-directed the film and crafted animated sequences that mirrored the absurdity of the live-action scenes, maintaining the show's signature aesthetic. His animations added a bold, chaotic visual element that complemented the verbal humor and helped shape the film's unconventional storytelling. The Holy Grail marked the comedy troupe's first full-length feature film, with Terry Gilliam and Terry Jones taking on directing duties despite having no prior experience. Things got off to a rocky start when, on the very first day of shooting at a remote and difficult location in Glencoe, the camera jammed during the opening shoots, leaving them without sound equipment and throwing their meticulous plans into disarray. In a BBC documentary, Gilliam recalled the panic that followed as they scrambled to keep filming with no functioning camera and little idea of how to adapt. Despite this rocky beginning, both directors later went on to have successful directing careers, with Jones helming later Monty Python films and Gilliam establishing himself with a string of acclaimed films like Brazil, Universal Pictures, 1985, The Fisher King, TriStar Pictures 1991, and 12 Monkeys, Universal Pictures 1995. The Holy Grail was primarily filmed on location across Scotland, using its dramatic landscapes and historic sites to lend an authentic medieval backdrop to the film's absurd comedy. This decision not only added visual depth and realism, but also allowed fans to later visit and recreate iconic scenes at the original locations. One of the most recognizable sites is Doune Castle, used for multiple scenes including the French Taunters and the Swamp Castle wedding. Situated near Stirling, the castle dates back to the 13th century and once belonged to Robert Stewart, the first Duke of Albany. It has since become a popular filming location for TV shows like HBO's Game of Thrones and Starz' Outlander. Other notable spots include the Tom Nadashan Mine near Loch Tay, which served as the entrance to the Cave of Caerbannog, and Bracklin Falls near Callander, a picturesque site formed along the Highland Boundary Fault. The film's climactic Battle of the Final Scene was shot on Sheriff Muir, near Demyat Hill in Stirling, with students from a nearby university standing in as extras. One of the most visually striking settings was Glencoe, used for the infamous Bridge of Death scene. Its towering peaks and haunting atmosphere have also made it a favorite for other film franchises, including Harry Potter. While some of these places are accessible tourist attractions like Doune Castle and Bracklin Falls, others such as the abandoned mine at Loch Tay are less developed and require caution when exploring. The use of real-world locations not only grounded the film's surreal humor, but has helped keep its legacy alive for decades. One early version of the film nearly included a character called the Pink Knight, who, unlike the combative Black Knight, would only let King Arthur pass if he gave him a kiss. This scene intended to highlight Arthur's outdated discomfort with homosexuality. Michael Palin's notes, now housed in the British Library, reveal that the sketch was originally meant to reflect the awkwardness surrounding the topic in the early 1970s, though Palin later admitted it would not be written today due to shifting cultural attitudes. Ultimately, the idea was scrapped because it felt too similar to the now iconic Black Knight scene, a decision that helped the film age better and remain a fan favorite without relying on dated references. John Cleese also played the character of the Black Knight while he was still fully intact, but once the Knight loses a leg, the role was taken over by a real amputee who was actually a local silversmith the crew happened to find. As the Black Knight's centuries escalated, the production eventually resorted to using a marionette to complete the effect, though John Cleese continued to provide all of the characters' dialogue. Although the film was meant as a parody of Arthurian legend, it ironically showcased impressive attention to detail, particularly in the knight's costumes. Each knight's armor and weaponry were adorned with unique artwork that reflected their individual character arcs. For instance, King Arthur's armor featured a sun motif symbolizing his divine guidance, while Sir Galahad's armor displayed a holy cross, alluding to his test of purity. These thoughtful design choices add subtle depth beneath the film's absurd humor. Also, working with a tight budget, crafting knight's armor out of wool painted to resemble metal. Though wool was certainly more flexible than real armor, the damp and chilly British weather made wearing these makeshift costumes a cold and uncomfortable experience for much of the cast, an aspect they were not exactly thrilled about. While much of the film has a modest production feel, the sizable army that King Arthur gathers near the film's end is surprisingly impressive. Unlike earlier scenes, where extras were mostly crew members, this particular sequence featured nearly 200 students from Scotland's University of Stirling. Despite the low pay of merely £2 per student, they could all still boast about being part of a classic comedy film. Despite the comedic brilliance that came from working with limitations, filming was not without frustrations. Co-director Gilliam insisted on historical authenticity inspired by painters like Peter Bruegel the Elder and filmmakers like Pier Paolo Pasolini, often clashing with other group members who cared less about realism and more about comedy. Shooting outdoors in the cold, rainy Scotland left the team soaked and miserable in their costumes, causing frequent complaints except from Gilliam, Jones, and Palin, who embraced the discomfort for the sake of the film. The commitment to realism and ridiculousness created a stark contrast that made the humor land even harder, especially in Chapman's deadpan portrayal of King Arthur amid all the madnesses. As the visual guy and co-director alongside Jones, Gilliam reflected on the film's chaotic production and his evolving role within the group. His communication style, often impatient and inarticulate under stress, led to tension and occasional walk-offs from set, though he later embraced those messy moments as part of the creative process. Despite feeling like an outsider at times, being the only American among the British group, Gilliam found a shared comedic worldview in their self-deprecating, anti-authoritarian humor. He credited the group's success to their contrasting skills and backgrounds, with his own cutout animation surprisingly resonating with American audiences. In later years, he maintained a love for visual storytelling, but lamented the formulaic direction of modern comic book films and Hollywood's lack of originality. Gilliam was originally set to play a much larger on-screen role as Sir Gawain, a character intended to frequently break the fourth wall. However, both plans changed, and the role evolved into Patsy, King Arthur's humble assistant. While the idea of adding a meta element was mostly dropped, a small hint remained when Patsy delivered his only fourth wall breaking line, commenting about Camelot that, "It's only a model." The infamous Rabbit of Caerbannog scene is one of the film's most iconic moments, and parts of it were shot using a real white rabbit borrowed from its owner. The crew applied what they believed was washable red dye to the rabbit for dramatic effect, only discovered afterward that the dye was not actually washable. While the rabbit remained unharmed, the unexpected trouble that followed made the team regret not purchasing their own rabbit for the shoot. The original ending of the film was meant to feature an epic battle between King Arthur's knights and the French taunters, complete with a surprise return of the killer Rabbit of Caerbannog. However, due to budget constraints, these grand plans had to be scrapped in favor of the much more abrupt and absurd conclusion in which the characters are arrested just before the attack. Palin's notes confirmed that the change was a financial necessity, leaving fans to only imagine what that climactic showdown might have looked like. Neil Innes, often referred to as the Seventh Python, contributed to the Holy Grail by composing original music for the film. Known for his work with the Bozo Dog Duda Band and the Beatles parody group The Ruddles, Inez's work included comedic songs and background tunes that matched the group's absurd and satirical style. His creative process differed from the writing approach of the Pythons, but the chemistry he shared with the group made his contributions a natural fit. Inez also appeared on screen in the film, most memorably being crushed by the giant wooden rabbit, cementing his place as a beloved, though unofficial, member of the team. After all filming wrapped up, the initial cut was met with a poor reception. Jones called the first screening a total disaster, and Gilliam recalled audiences walking out. The team re-edited the film numerous times, with Eric Idle noting that there were 13 test screens to gradually drag it towards being funny. The film eventually earned around $5 million, over 12 times its modest budget, and significantly boosted Monty Python's popularity, particularly in the United States. As of the 18th of April 2025, Monty Python and the Holy Grail has a 91% critics rating on Rotten Tomatoes, a 91 out of 100 critic score on Metacritic, an 8.2 rating on IMDb, and a 4.1 rating on Letterboxd. In 2004, the film was voted the best British film of all time by film fans in a poll conducted by Amazon's British arm and IMDb. The film first premiered on television in the United States via CBS at 11:30 p.m. on Friday the 25th of February 1977. The group then called out CBS for editing out some of its adult content. When the film was later broadcast by PBS, it was aired uncensored. The film was also later aired uncut on Comedy Central and IFC. Producer Mark Verstater, who helped finance the film and was contractually treated as an equal partner, argued he was owed a full 1/7 share of the profits from the success of Spamalot, the 2005 stage musical based on the film, just like each of the 6 Monty Python members. While he had long received a 1/7 share of other spin-off profits, the team later contended that he was only entitled to 1/14 of the so-called top half, 50%, of spin-off profits from Spamalot. Interpreting the contract stated 7.1429% share as a percentage of the entire pool rather than of the 50%. The UK High Court, however, ruled in Verstater's favour, finding that despite the ambiguous wording, the long-standing precedent and mutual understanding of over 30 years supported his claim to a full 1/7. The judge then rectified the contract accordingly. And that wraps up our deep dive into the making of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to stay up to date on all things movies in the making. Let us know in the comments what you think of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, or if you have any favorite moments from that film we did not touch upon, or what films you would like to hear covered by this channel. Also be sure to check out our community page, where we announce what films will be talked about by this channel each week. New posts arrive every Friday. Or Saturday, if we forget to post on Friday. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next time on Movies in the Making, where we'll be talking about Kill Bill, Volume 1, Miramax 2003, and more films to follow along the way. Tune in for more Movies in the Making as we uncover the stories behind cinema's most unforgettable films. This has been Jason Scotchmer, film enthusiast and passionate about the arts.